A poor girl, desperate to save her sick mother, pretends to live a life of luxury to win the heart of a wealthy man she meets at a coffee shop. But what she doesn't know, he's her billionaire boss, hiding his true identity while she spins her web of lies. When the truth comes out, their love faces the ultimate test. If you're new here, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and let us know where you're watching from. Rain soaked Mary's thin dress as she stood trembling, her eyes red but defiant. Across from her, Mark held a black umbrella, his expensive suit dry, his face hard. His eyes, though, burned with pain. "Why did you lie to me, Mary?" he asked, his voice breaking. She tried to speak, but her throat tightened. How could she explain? She pretended to be rich to win his heart, not knowing he was her billionaire boss. Now she'd lost him. This is the story of Mary and Mark. A poor girl with only her pride, and a rich man with everything but trust. Mary sat in a cozy coffee shop, her hands wrapped around a cheap coffee she'd paid for with pocket change. She was 24, her dark hair in a messy bun, her face tired but fierce. Her dress was secondhand, but she sat tall, hiding her poverty. Mary wasn't just broke, she was fighting to survive. She cared for her sick mother in a cramped apartment, scraping by on odd jobs. Tomorrow she had an interview at Sterling Books, a huge publishing company. The assistant job could pay her mother's medical bills. It was her chance to escape. Then he walked in. A man in a tailored suit, dark hair neat, his watch gleaming like it cost a fortune. He was tall, handsome, with cold eyes that seemed to hide something. Mary stared, then looked away, embarrassed. He belonged to a world of wealth she could only dream of. But when he glanced at her, she sat straighter, smoothing her dress. She wanted to seem like she belonged. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth, pointing to the chair across from her. Mary's heart raced. "No, it's free," she said, forcing a confident smile. "I'm Mark," he said, sitting down. "No last name. You come here often?" She hesitated. She could tell him the truth, that she could barely afford coffee. But something in his gaze made her want to impress him. "Sometimes," she lied, her voice light. "I like trying new places. Keeps life exciting." He raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Sounds like you live a big life." Mary's cheeks warmed. "You could say that," she said, leaning forward. She talked about fancy restaurants she'd never been to, vacations she'd never taken. Each lie came easier, her pride pushing her to match his world. Mark listened, his eyes locked on hers, like he saw something she didn't. They talked for an hour, laughing, the air between them electric. When he left, he handed her his number on a napkin. "Call me," he said. "I want to see you again." Mary clutched the napkin, her heart pounding. She didn't know Mark was Mark Sterling, the billionaire owner of Sterling Books. He didn't run the company day to day. He stayed home, leaving it to his manager. She thought he was just a rich stranger. And she was already pretending to be someone she wasn't. The next day, Mary walked into Sterling Books' gleaming lobby, clutching a handwritten job application. Her worn shoes clicked on marble floors. She felt small among the suited employees, but she lifted her chin. The interview was tough. 2 managers grilled her about her skills. No college, but she taught herself everything. "I work hard," she said. "I don't quit." They nodded, unimpressed. She left feeling small, sure she'd failed. That night, In her tiny apartment, her mother's cough echoing, the phone rang. "You start Monday," the HR manager said. Mary's hands shook. She'd gotten the job. But she had no idea the man she'd lied to in the coffee shop was her boss, or that her lies would unravel everything. Mary's life was split in two. By day, she was a struggling assistant at Sterling Books, drowning in work and judgment. By night, she was a rich woman, or so she pretended, to keep Mark's attention. She was 24, her dark hair always neat, her pride hiding the fear in her eyes. Her worn shoes and thrift store clothes marked her as poor, but she stood tall, ignoring the whispers of coworkers who called her out of place. She needed this job. Her mother's hospital bills were growing, and the landlord was knocking. Every paycheck went to medicine and rent, leaving Mary with nothing but her determination. At Sterling Books, Miss Carter, the manager, was a constant shadow. She ran the company while its owner, a mysterious billionaire, stayed out of sight. Miss Carter's voice was sharp, her eyes cold. "You're behind on these reports," she snapped one morning, dropping a stack of papers on Mary's desk. "Finish them by noon, or you're done." Mary nodded, her hands trembling. She worked through lunch, her stomach empty, her head aching. A coworker, Sarah, smirked from across the room. "Can't keep up, huh?" she said. "This isn't a charity." Mary's cheeks burned, but she bit her tongue. Losing this job would ruin her. Across the city, in a penthouse filled with sleek furniture, Mark Sterling sat at his desk. At 32, he was the billionaire owner of Sterling Books, a man who'd turned a failing business into an empire. His suits were tailored, his watch worth a fortune, but his eyes were distant, like he'd built walls around his heart. He'd learned not to trust. People wanted his money, his power, never him. He stayed home, letting Ms. Carter handle the company, signing papers from afar. But his mind kept drifting to Mary, the woman from the coffee shop. Her charm, her laugh, the way she spoke of a life full of wealth, it pulled him in. Yet something felt wrong. Her stories were too perfect, too vague. Was she hiding something? Their dates were frequent now, but tension hung between them. One night, at a fancy restaurant with chandeliers and soft music, Mary sat across from Mark, her dress borrowed from a friend, her heels pinching her feet. She'd spent her last dollar on a cab to look the part. Mark looked effortless, his suit crisp, his smile small but warm. "You're quiet," he said, his eyes studying her. "Just tired," Mary said, forcing a smile. She ordered the cheapest dish, claiming she wasn't hungry. Her heart raced. She couldn't afford this place, but she couldn't let him know. "You mentioned a ski trip last time," Mark said, sipping his wine. "Where was it?" "Aspen." Mary's stomach twisted. She'd lied about skiing in Aspen, pulling details from a movie. "Yeah, Aspen," she said, her voice too quick. "It was cold. Fun, though." He nodded, but his eyes narrowed. "Which lodge?" "I've been a few times." She froze, her mind blank. "The Mountain View," she said, making it up. "Small place. Cozy." Mark's smile faded slightly. "Never heard of it," he said, his tone even. He changed the subject, but Mary felt his gaze, like he was waiting for her to crack. She kept up the act, talking about fake parties, fake friends, but every word felt heavier. Lying to him hurt. She liked him, his quiet humor, the way his eyes softened sometimes. But she couldn't stop. If he knew she was poor, would he still want her? At work, The pressure never let up. Ms. Carter called Mary into her office one afternoon, her face stern. "Your filing is a mess," she said. "And you're slow. Do you even want this job?" Mary's throat tightened. "I do," she said. "I'll fix it." She stayed late, her eyes burning, her mother's cough echoing in her mind. A coworker lingered, watching her. "You're trying too hard," he said. "This place eats people like you." Mary ignored him, her pride keeping her going. She couldn't fail, not for herself, not for her mother. Another night, Mark invited her to a charity gala. "It's a big event," he texted. "You'll shine." Mary panicked. She had no gown, no money. She borrowed a dress from a neighbor, spent hours fixing it to look expensive, and showed up at the gala, her heart pounding. The room was full of rich people, their jewelry sparkling, their laughter loud. Mark stood out, his presence commanding, his eyes on her. "You look perfect," he said, but his tone was careful, like he was searching for something. "Thanks," Mary said, her voice shaky. She mingled, pretending to know the guests, dropping names she'd read in magazines. But when a man asked about her family's estate, she stumbled. "It's outside the city," she said, her face hot. He frowned, walking away. Mark watched from across the room, his expression unreadable. Later, as they walked to his car, he stopped. "Mary," he said, his voice low, "you say a lot, but it's all surface. Where do you really come from?" Her heart stopped. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice high. "I've told you about my life." "Not really," he said, his eyes piercing. "You talk, but it's like you're hiding." He wasn't angry, but his words cut. Mary's hands clenched. She wanted to tell him. She was poor, scared, lying to keep him. But fear stopped her. He was rich, powerful, untouchable. She was nothing, clinging to a job and a lie. Mark felt the gap too. He knew Mary worked at his company. Her application had crossed his desk. He knew her address, her struggles. But he hadn't told her who he was. He wanted her to want him, not his billions. Her lies hurt the... Was she after his money? He liked her, maybe more than liked, but trust was hard. Their secrets, her fake wealth, his hidden identity, were a wall between them, and the imbalance of their worlds made it stronger. Mary's world was a tightrope. At Sterling Books, she fought to keep her job, her pride hiding the fear that one mistake could cost her everything. At night, she became someone else, meeting Mark and spinning lies about a rich life she didn't have. She was 24, her dark hair neat despite her exhaustion, her worn clothes a secret she buried under a confident smile. Her mother's hospital bills loomed, and every dollar went to keeping her alive. But with Mark, Mary felt a spark, something real, even through her lies. She didn't know he was Mark Sterling, the billionaire owner of her company, a man who stayed home while Ms. Carter ran his empire. She thought he was just a wealthy man, someone she had to impress. Mark lived in a penthouse that felt empty despite its luxury. His suits were perfect, his wealth endless, but his heart was guarded. He'd built Sterling Books from nothing, but trust was harder than money. People wanted his power, not him. Mary was different. Her laugh, her fire, the way she seemed to see him. But her stories of wealth didn't add up, and he knew she worked at his company, scraping by. He hadn't told her who he was, wanting her to like him for himself. Her lies hurt, but he couldn't stay away. Something about her pulled him closer. Their dates had been tense, with Mary dodging questions and Mark watching her carefully. But one night, something shifted. They met at a quiet park, away from the fancy restaurants Mary couldn't afford. She wore a simple dress, borrowed but less flashy, her hands fidgeting. Mark suggested the park, sensing her discomfort at expensive places. They sat on a bench, the city lights glowing in the distance. "No pressure tonight," he said, his voice soft. "Just us." Mary relaxed, her guard slipping. "I like this," she said, looking at the stars. "It's peaceful." Mark nodded, his eyes on her. "You don't seem like the gala type anyway," he said, half teasing. "All that noise." She laughed, a real laugh, not the fake one she used to impress him. "Yeah, those places are a lot." For once, she didn't lie. The truth felt close, but she held it back, afraid he'd walk away if he knew she was poor. He looked at her, his face softer than usual. "Tell me something real," he said. "Not about trips or parties. Something about you." Mary's heart raced. She couldn't tell him everything, not about her sick mother, her tiny apartment, her lies. But his eyes, warm for once, made her want to share. "I used to read to my mom," she said, her voice quiet. "When I was a kid. We didn't have much, but we had books." She'd smile, even when things were hard. Mark's expression changed, like a wall came down. "My mom loved books too," he said. "She died when I was young. Cancer. I still have her old novels, all marked up with her notes." Mary's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "That's hard." He shrugged, but his eyes were distant. "It was a long time ago. Made me who I am, I guess." They sat in silence, the air heavy but not tense. For the first time, Mary felt like she wasn't performing. She wanted to tell him more, about her mother's illness, her struggles, but fear stopped her. What if he judged her? Still, that moment on the bench felt like a bridge between their worlds. At work, Mary's life was harder than ever. Ms. Carter piled on tasks, her voice cutting. "You're late on these emails," she said one day, glaring. "Do better or you're out." Mary nodded, her stomach in knots. Coworkers whispered, calling her desperate. She stayed late, her hands shaking as she typed, her mother's cough echoing in her mind. One night, she found a note on her desk, a mistake she'd missed in a report. Ms. Carter had circled it in red. "Last warning," it read. Mary's eyes burned with tears, but she wiped them away. She couldn't break. Another evening, Mark asked her to a small diner, not a fancy place. Mary was relieved. She didn't have to borrow a dress. They sat in a booth, sharing fries, and Mark opened up again. "I wasn't always rich," he said, his voice low. "My dad's business was failing when I took over. I worked nights, slept in my car sometimes. People think money's easy, but it's lonely." Mary stared at him, surprised. He wasn't just a rich man, he'd fought for his place, like her. "I get that," she said, her voice soft. "Feeling alone, I mean." She stopped short, afraid to say more. But Mark reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "You're not alone," he said, his eyes locking on hers. "Not with me." Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, but her lies weighed her down. She pulled her hand back, smiling weakly. "Thanks," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Their closeness grew, but it was fragile. Mary shared small truths, her love for old books, her dream of writing one day. Mark talked about his mother, his fear of losing control. Each moment brought them closer, but their secrets loomed. Mary's lies about being rich were harder to keep up. One night, at a quiet coffee shop, Mark asked about her family. "You never talk about them," he said, his tone gentle but curious. Not well," Mary said, her voice breaking. It was the most truth she'd given him. "It's hard sometimes." Mark's face softened. "I'm sorry," he said. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." She nodded, tears in her eyes. She wanted to tell him everything, her poverty, her fear, her lies. But she couldn't. He was rich, powerful, and she was just an assistant, pretending to be someone she wasn't. Mark too held back. He knew she worked at his company, knew she was struggling, but he didn't tell her he was her boss. He wanted her to open up first, to trust him. Their vulnerability brought them closer, but their secrets kept them apart, like a crack in the foundation of their bond. Mary and Mark were closer than ever, but their bond was built on secrets. Mary hid her poverty behind a proud smile, pretending to be rich to keep Mark's attention. Her days at Sterling Books were a battle, endless work, harsh words from Ms. Carter, and whispers from coworkers who saw her as less. Her mother's hospital bills kept her awake at night, but with Mark, she felt alive. She didn't know he was Mark Sterling, the billionaire owner of her company, a man who stayed home while Ms. Carter ran his empire. She thought he was just a wealthy man, someone she had to impress with lies about fancy trips and a life she didn't live. Mark lived in a penthouse that felt empty despite its wealth. His suits were perfect, his power unmatched, but his heart was locked away. Mary's warmth, her small truths about her love for books and her sick mother, had cracked his walls. He knew she worked at his company, knew she was poor from her job application, but he hadn't told her he was her boss. He wanted her to trust him first, to be real with him. Her lies about being rich stung, but he couldn't pull away. He was falling for her and it scared him. Their closeness was fragile, built on moments of vulnerability. But the truth was coming, like a storm they couldn't stop. It started at work. Ms. Carter called Mary into her office one morning, her face colder than usual. "You made a mistake in the quarterly report," she said, holding up a paper circled in red. This went to the owner. "He's not happy." Mary's heart sank. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll fix it." "You better," Ms. Carter snapped. "One more error and you're gone." Mary nodded, her hands clenched. She worked late, her eyes burning, fear gripping her. She couldn't lose this job, her mother's life depended on it. That night, Mark texted her. "Dinner tomorrow? My place." Mary's stomach twisted. His place? She'd never been somewhere so private with him. It felt like a step forward, but her lies felt heavier than ever. She spent the next day sewing a thrift store dress to look expensive, her fingers trembling. At Mark's penthouse, she stood frozen at the door. The place was huge, glass walls, sleek furniture, a view of the city that made her feel small. Mark greeted her, his shirt casual but still costly, his smile warm but careful. "Come in," he said. "I cooked." Mary laughed, nervous. "You cook? I thought rich guys had chefs." He shrugged, his eyes flickering. "Not always. I like things simple sometimes." They ate pasta at a table overlooking the skyline, the air soft but tense. Mary tried to keep up her act, talking about a fake art auction she'd attended. But Mark was quieter than usual, his eyes searching hers. "You talk a lot about your life," he said, setting down his fork. "But it's always big stuff. Parties, trips. Never anything small. Why?" Mary's heart pounded. "I don't know," she said, her voice high. "That's just me." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Is it? Because I feel like I don't know you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him. She was poor, scared, lying to keep him. But before she could speak, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face hardening. "Work," he said, standing. "Give me a second." He stepped into another room, leaving Mary alone. Her eyes wandered, landing on a stack of papers on a side table. The top sheet had the Sterling Books logo. Curious, she glanced closer. It was a report, her report, the one Miss Carter had scolded her about, with her name on it. Her heart stopped. Why was it here? She flipped through it, her hands shaking, and saw a note in bold, reviewed by Mark Sterling. The room spun. Mark Sterling? Her Mark? He was the owner of Sterling Books? Her boss? The man who'd seen her job application, her address, her real life? She felt sick. He'd known she was poor all along. Every lie she'd told about Paris, galas, her rich life, he'd known it wasn't true. Why hadn't he said anything? Was he playing with her? Mark came back, his face calm until he saw her holding the papers. "Mary," he said, his voice low. "What are you doing?" Her eyes burned with tears. "You're Mark Sterling?" she asked, her voice shaking. "You own my company? You knew who I was this whole time?" He froze, his jaw tight. "Yes," he said. "I didn't tell you because I wanted you to be real with me." "Real?" Mary laughed, bitter. "You let me lie to you. You knew I wasn't rich, knew I was struggling, and you said nothing. Were you laughing at me?" "No," Mark said, stepping closer. "I wasn't laughing. I wanted to know you, not your lies. But you kept pretending. Why?" Mary's tears fell. "Because I thought you'd leave if you knew the truth," she said. "I'm nobody. Vorma. My mom's dying, and I can barely pay for her medicine. I lied to fit in your world. I didn't know you were my boss." Mark's face softened, but his eyes were hurt. "I didn't tell you who I was because everyone wants something from me," he said. "Money, power. I thought you were different, but you lied too." Mary's chest ached. "I lied because I care about you," she said, her voice breaking. "I was scared you'd walk away." He looked at her, his eyes torn. "I cared about you too," he said. "But I don't know if I can trust you." The words hit like a slap. Mary stepped back, tears streaming. "Then why did you keep me around?" she asked. "To watch me fail?" "No," Mark said, his voice soft but firm. "Because I was falling for you." Mary froze, her heart breaking. She wanted to run to him, to tell him she loved him too. But the lies, the secrets, the gap between their worlds, it was too much. She grabbed her bag and ran, the penthouse door slamming behind her. Mary ran from Mark's penthouse, her heart shattered. The truth burned. She'd lied about being rich to impress him, and he'd known all along, hiding that he was Mark Sterling, her billionaire boss. She was 24, her pride all she had left, her cheap dress soaked with tears as she stumbled into the night. She'd fallen for him, but his silence felt like betrayal. How could he let her lie, knowing her real life, her sick mother, her tiny apartment, her struggle? At Sterling Books, Mary could barely focus. Ms. Carter's sharp voice cut through her fog. "Your work's slipping," she snapped, tossing a file on Mary's desk. "Fix it or you're out." Mary nodded, her hands shaking. Coworkers whispered, their eyes cold. She felt alone, exposed, like everyone saw her failure. At home, her mother's cough was worse, the hospital bills piling up. Mary cried herself to sleep, Mark's words echoing, "I was falling for you." But he didn't trust her, and she couldn't trust him. Mark, in his penthouse, stared at the city skyline, his wealth meaningless. At 32, he'd built Sterling Books into an empire, but his heart was empty. Mary's tears, her raw confession, "I'm poor, my mom's dying," haunted him. He'd hidden his identity to protect himself, but it hurt her. He wanted to call her, to explain, but her lies stung too. Was she ever real with him? He stopped texting her, the silence heavy, his loneliness deeper than before. Mary stopped answering Mark's calls, deleting his messages without reading them. She couldn't face him, not after he'd known her truth and said nothing. Work was her only focus, but even that was crumbling. One day, Ms. Carter called her in. "The owner's reviewing your performance," she said, her eyes hard. Mary's stomach dropped. Mark was deciding her fate even now. She wanted to hate him, but her heart ached for the man who'd shared his past, who'd almost loved her. They were worlds apart now. Mary, fighting to survive, felt small, her lies a mistake that cost her everything. Mark, surrounded by wealth, felt hollow, his secrecy pushing away the one person who'd felt real. Their love, so close to blooming, was broken by distrust. Mary walked home alone, her pride battered. Mark sat in his empty penthouse, his walls back up. They were separated not by distance, but by the pain of their secrets. Mary's world was gray. At 24, she poured everything into her job at Sterling Books, her pride all that kept her going. Her mother's hospital bills loomed, and Ms. Carter's harsh words, "One more mistake, you're out," rang in her ears. Mary avoided thoughts of Mark, the man she'd loved, now a painful memory. She knew he was Mark Sterling, her billionaire boss, who'd hidden his identity while she lied about being rich. His silence had hurt her, and her lies had hurt him. They hadn't spoken since she ran from his penthouse, their trust broken. Mark sat in his penthouse, the city skyline mocking his emptiness. His wealth, his power as Sterling Books owner, meant nothing without Mary. Her confession, her poverty, her sick mother, replayed in his mind. He'd hidden his identity to protect himself, but it pushed her away. He missed her laugh, her strength, the way she made him feel alive. He'd been proud, guarding his heart, but losing her was worse than any betrayal. He couldn't stay silent. Mark called Ms. Carter. "Mary Collins," he said. "She's not to be fired, no matter what. And send her to me." Ms. Carter hesitated but agreed. Mark's heart pounded. He was risking his pride, his control, but Mary was worth it. The next day, Mary was called to Ms. Carter's office. "The owner wants to see you," Ms. Carter said, her tone sharp. "He's at his home. Go now." Mary's stomach dropped. But. She wanted to refuse, but her job was on the line. She took a bus to his penthouse, her hands shaking, her old dress a reminder of her lies. Mark opened the door, his suit gone, replaced by a simple shirt. His eyes were soft, nervous. "Mary," he said, "please come in." She stood stiff, her voice cold. "Why am I here? To fire me yourself?" "No," Mark said, stepping closer. "I'm sorry. I should have told you who I was. I hid it because I wanted you to see me, not my money. But I hurt you, and I hate myself for it." Mary's eyes burned. "You knew I was lying," she said. "You let me make a fool of myself." "I was scared too," Mark said, his voice breaking. "Everyone wants something from me. You felt real even with your lies. I love you, Mary. I don't care if you're poor. I care about you." Tears fell down Mary's cheeks. "I lied because I thought you'd leave," she said. "I love you too, but I'm nobody." "You're everything," Mark said, taking her hand. "Stay with me. No more secrets." Mary hesitated, then squeezed his hand. His sacrifice, his pride, his walls, mended her heart. They weren't equal in wealth, but in love, they were starting to be. Mary stood in Mark's penthouse, her hand in his, her heart racing. Her pride, once her shield, now softened by his words. She'd lied about being rich to impress him, not knowing he was Mark Sterling, her billionaire boss. He'd hidden his identity too, but his apology, his sacrifice of pride, had broken their walls. Her old dress and worn shoes no longer felt like shame. For the first time, she felt seen. Mark looked at her with soft eyes. His wealth, sterling books, his penthouse, his empire, meant nothing without her. He'd stayed home, letting Ms. Carter run his company, guarding his heart from betrayal. But Mary's strength, her love despite her lies, had changed him. He'd risked everything to win her back, and now, holding her hand, he felt whole. "I meant it," Mark said, his voice soft. "I don't care about money or lies. I want you, Mary." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I was so scared," she said. "I thought you'd never want someone like me. Poor, struggling." "You're not someone like you," Mark said. "You're you. That's enough." Mary smiled, her fear fading. "I want us to be real," she said. "No more pretending. No more secrets," he promised, pulling her close. The next weeks were different. At Sterling Books, Mary worked hard, but the pressure felt lighter. Ms. Carter eased up. Mark had made it clear Mary's job was safe. Co-workers still whispered, but Mary didn't care. She wasn't hiding anymore. She told Mark about her mother's illness, her tiny apartment, her dreams of writing. He listened, never judging, sharing his own fears, losing his mother, building his company alone. One evening, Mark visited Mary's apartment. It was small, the walls cracked, her mother asleep in the next room. He didn't flinch. "This is you," he said, smiling. "It's real." He handed her a check, enough to cover her mother's bills. "It's not charity," he said. "It's because I love you." Mary hesitated, her pride prickling, but she took it. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick. "I love you too." They weren't equal in wealth, but in love, they were the same. Mary no longer pretended to be rich, and Mark no longer hid his power. They faced the world together, her strength, his heart, their trust. At a quiet dinner, just the two of them, Mary laughed, free for the first time. Mark watched her, his smile wide. "We made it," he said. "We did," Mary said, her hand in his. Their love, once broken by lies, was now unbreakable, built on truth. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories.